Robby, what is on your radar?
Well, Jessica, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has now admitted publicly that moderators at Facebook and Instagram faced vast pressure from the federal government to take down contrarian COVID-19 content, election-related content, including jokes and satire, as well as the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story. This led the platforms to make moderation decisions that Zuckerberg now regrets. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it, wrote Zuckerberg in a letter to the House Judiciary Committee, which is investigating suppression of speech on social media. We're ready to push back if something like this happens again. That's what he said. This is a welcome development, although not everybody who previously complained about the company's moderation policies is happy about it. Venture capitalist Eric Weinstein, for instance, opined that Zuckerberg's wealth should be distributed to those he targeted and wronged as recompense for what occurred under his watch. That's some serious victim blaming, in my opinion. Zuckerberg's critics like to pretend that standing up to the federal government would have been an easy choice. Obviously it wasn't. President Joe Biden accused Facebook of killing people. Remember that? And he implied that he would call for congressional action to punish the company if it did not fall in line. Let's watch.
COVID misinformation. On COVID misinformation, what's your message to platforms like Facebook?
They're killing people. I mean, it really, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
Love that anachronistic pandemic of the unvaccinated. How did that work out? In any case, Kate Bedingfield, who was a member of Biden's communications team, explicitly told MSNBC that the administration would target Meta's Section 230 protection if the platform did not heed the government's requests. Now, it wasn't as if Republicans had been offering incentives for Zuckerberg and other tech CEOs to act bravely. They weren't lining up to defend them. On the contrary, many in the GOP were just as eager to abolish Section 230 as their Democratic counterparts. Former President Donald Trump, current Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, Senator Josh Hawley, many others have all inveighed against this law. And I say this is foolishness. Now, as a reminder of what Section 230 is, it's the federal statute that makes social media possible. Enacted in 1996 as part of the Communications Decency Act, the law establishes that internet websites are not, generally speaking, liable for third-party generated content. In a nutshell, this means that if a user writes something libelous on Facebook, that person can be sued. Facebook cannot be sued. It's impossible to overstate the importance of this legal protection. If websites were held liable for all content, they would become significantly more restrictive. It's no surprise then that prominent Democrats universally in support of removing Section 230 protection. They think social media companies do not moderate enough content and that more ought to be done to curb so-called hate speech and misinformation. They correctly surmise that one way to encourage even more heavy-handed moderation would be to eliminate Section 230, thus stripping social media sites of their protection from frivolous lawsuits. Democrats understand that the rise of social media has been a positive development for conservative, independent, libertarian, contrarian, and alternative media ecosystems. The swiftest way to destroy these ecosystems will be to deprive the platforms of their legal shield. That's why the threats from the Biden administration were so very serious. For Meta, X, Google, and other tech giants, there was a very real possibility that censorship-minded Democrats and misguided tech-phobic Republicans would come together and approve federal legislation to punish social media sites. Many in the GOP were perfectly willing to abandon free market principles, join with Democrats in going after Zuckerberg. So is it any surprise then that Meta, lacking allies, was reluctant to tell the feds to buzz off? Meanwhile, the worst reaction to Zuckerberg's letter came courtesy of, you guessed it, CNN, which headlined the news write-up of the development in this manner: Mark Zuckerberg's election season gift to Republicans. The article continues, Mark Zuckerberg is handing Republicans political victories ahead of the 2024 presidential election, acquiescing to years of GOP grievances over his company's policies. That's according to CNN's John Passantino, a deputy managing editor. According to that article's framing, the federal pressure campaign directed at Zuckerberg was not the real problem. The real problem was Zuckerberg revealed the existence of the pressure campaign. He said the quiet part out loud. Passantino seems to suggest that it was bad to expose efforts by federal bureaucrats to browbeat social media companies into removing provocative content. He writes, quote, "The letter was immediately weaponized by Trump." Oh no, not that. If Zuckerberg's letter is a potent weapon for Republicans, perhaps the Biden administration deserves some blame for equipping them with it. They didn't have to do that. Incessantly pestering social media companies in a manner that raises fundamental First Amendment questions was a choice, and it was a bad one. And I think it's telling that CNN has little to say about that, would rather complain that Zuckerberg, at long last, has had enough and is speaking out. Gift to Republicans indeed. So I thought the framing of that article was just totally wrong. It shows the limited way CNN and other mainstream outlets think that, like, here's an important development where the CEO of the company admits that there was vast censorship that occurred on the platform that he regrets, that was motivated by the information he got from the feds that he would not do again. That's a huge story. It confirms a lot of what we have reported on our show, what friends of the show like Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger have reported on. The paranoia about the federal overreach justified. CNN doesn't think that's the story. The story is, well, Republicans are going to pounce. Republicans are going to use this to benefit themselves. Well, is it a legitimate thing for them to be mad about? Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think it's a poison in our society that any news is looked at. Who is this good for? The right or the left? Democrats or Republicans? Trump or Kamala Harris? Instead of just what is good for society. Is this bad? Should people in power fix this? Should people in power be doing this? And it reminds me of TikTok. And I think that a big reason TikTok became the target of Congress and the government to ban is because it's very likely they wouldn't play ball when it came to censorship. And I think it's really telling that leaders of the ADL were caught on a leaked audio saying we have a TikTok problem in reference to how many pro-Palestine posts were on the app and how they outnumbered posts that were in defense of what the IDF was doing in Gaza. And so at the end of the day, if the government has a particular narrative they want to push, and they're willing to label anything that's unfavorable to the US position as un-American or disinformation or misinformation, that's a really scary place to be in politically. And it's bad when Republicans do it. Republican administrations, I'm sure, did this under 9/11. Democratic administrations have done this under COVID-19. And I'm sure in some years we're going to see some evidence as to what this looked like around the US support of Israel. So it's very scary that the solution was just to get rid of TikTok. It's good Mark Zuckerberg is speaking up about this and saying we've got to change how we do it. How this happened was wrong.
Yes, indeed. All right, we'll be back with more Rising right after this.